Wait, could we leave those up, please?
We're good.
Okay. Cool. So first of all, let's give this a README read. Let me share this on Slack. This outlines very generally what we're trying to build. I already shared it here. So let me just tag. So let's take about 5 minutes to go, skim through the README, see what you can, try to get what the exercise is about, and then maybe let's share some of the questions you may have, or comments.
Can I stream from Tasman?
Say that again?
Can I stream from other because of the chairs are
Okay, that's fine.
Are we actually submitting something or just following along?
No, I don't think we're gonna submit.
We're not doing like a fork push?
No. Actually, also yes, fork this repo. We're gonna be working in there. Say that again? So let's take 5 minutes, read through it, see if I shared this link. We're going to be working on this. I shared it on the WebTech channel. We're going to be reviewing how to build a full stack web app.
Okay, so it's basically the other review that.
Yeah.
build it yourself, or you're just gonna do it yourself?
No, we're gonna be building some. You're gonna be building some, and so on.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're trying to build the whole thing.
Say that again.
We're trying to build the whole thing.
Okay.
Internationally.
Say that again. I don't think it will spoil you. I think it will just give you more tools.
Thank you.
Yeah. Cool. So, any questions, general thoughts about what we're gonna be building today? Like, sort of talking through. Similar to a whiteboarding interview, like talking through how is it that we're going to be building this. Cameron, you had something?
Yeah, when you, under backend API endpoints, when you put carrots around the ID, is that just something there to show it's not even related to?
That's a good question. That is a really good question. So when you see something like this, in code, it generally means that it's supposed to be replaced with an actual ID. You'll see it like that, or you may also see it as square brackets. I'm thinking about what other ways I have seen it. But this is the most common one. With angle brackets, it means you're actually supposed to put an actual ID there. Mm-hmm. Thank you. So what are the two main routes that we have in here? Lewis?
Vegetable and bread.
Cool. So we have, so we're going to have some sort of like, and I did the main route will be inventory, and then there's two sub routes here. One is for bread and another one is for vegetable, right? And I did this because I was thinking that then later on maybe we could introduce Postgres as a database, which we're not gonna do on this one. This one is just gonna be the Express server and the front end. But I was thinking that then later we could add Postgres into the mix, and then we could have another endpoint for like an e-store where you could actually, maybe see the catalog of the items and maybe add items to your cart and, sort of building a more robust. So that's why I put this one as inventory, because leave it open in the case we want to expand it. Cool. So we have inventory, and this has two sub routes. One is for vegetables, and the other one is for bread. Other questions or comments?
Is it important to have like a message appear when data is /inventory? Like a message to appear like, I don't know.
That's a good question. So if I understood correctly,
Like,
what if they visit just
yes.
inventory? What should we display or give them,
Yeah.
right? What do you guys think? I don't know. I don't just go on there. Show everything? Okay.
Is that even necessary? I'm just saying,
Yeah, so
it's possible.
it is possible, right? And this is when you realize that it's up to you how to do a lot of these things. But that's a great question. I think so. Also, I was thinking about, I think this project we could expand later on, because, for instance, on a real application, you don't want to give regular users access to your inventory, right? Right. So maybe later on we could add like user authentication for if the user is not registered, if they're not an admin, then they cannot see the inventory, something like that. Cool. So yeah, I think maybe let's have that in mind for like display everything. Cool. Any other questions, ideas? Do we have any sub-routes here? One, right? What is the sub-route that we have in this? A D9. So let's just do it like this. Let's do like right. Should we have more endpoints? What would those serve for? Or I guess, yeah, so imagine this is a system we can be building for a supermarket in which they want to keep track of their inventory. So you can see that there is some, so we have these methods here that we want to send network requests to. So for instance, if we go to /inventory/vegetable, we can send two types of network requests here. We can send a GET request and a POST request. The GET request will get all the items that are vegetable, and POST will add one to the list, right? For this, the endpoints that have the ID, we have three methods. One for getting that one specific item, another one for caching that or updating. Let's say the price of carrots went up, so you want to be able to update that. But then what was another thing that we could update? Right? The units that we have in inventory. Let's say we got a new shipment. You want to update that number as well, and then delete. We run out of that. We run out of that, or maybe we don't serve it anymore. Question about like the methods that we're going to be using for sending those network requests. What other method requests could we use? So
I'm just thinking. I don't recall what path it is.
sorry.
Okay.
This is a spelling mistake.
No, I'm sorry.
Why do you think I skipped put?
Using hash.
Yeah. What is the difference between those two? Hash and put. Oh, and
Put changes like the whole object, and hash only changes the part of it.
that's correct. So if we want to do put to update an item, we'll need to send all the information. Or we'll just get erased. If we only want to update the price, for instance, we need to send the price, the new price, and all the other information. So in hash will allow us to do partial updates a little bit better. Cool. So this is what a JavaScript representation of a veggie is going to look like in our system. Questions about the properties or the values of a veggie item. Yes.
About the objectives, since I'm learning about dates in JavaScript, and I see them having arrived timestamps.
Yeah.
So I don't really know
Yeah, so it is how to create a timestamp like this mainly. What does it mean? For instance, in
That dates the time.
yes, that's
We
correct.
create that ourselves.
Yes, we're gonna create that with the date object in JavaScript. Yeah. Thank you for that. Cool. So I think that's that. Let's look at now how a bread is. The bread basically will have the exact same operations, just for bread. And here we have what a bread is gonna look like in our system. It's gonna have an ID, price. Questions maybe about the bread object. Is this a fair representation of the bread?
Oh, that's when it was delivered.
Yes, this is when it was delivered. Cool. So for the front end, so that's sort of general idea of what our backend is going to look like, what the data inside of backend is going to look like. Now for the front end, similar to what you're building in the project, we're going to have two forms. One for adding a veggie and another one for adding bread. We should display the list of, let's say actually let's do, this is something I didn't have the time to do earlier, but let's think about what our user interface should look like. What do you think the user interface or the front end for this app should look like? So we have a page. What should we fill in this page? Do you think it should be like a form here for adding, and then maybe like a list of items here, and then one for the veggies and another one for the bread? Oh, so like on, so split vertically. Okay, I like that. So let's do. Cool, and then we're gonna have like a form here, and then a list of items here. And the form will have some input fields, maybe a submit button. Cool, and then just two of those. Okay, that makes sense. Oh, this one is one that is going to be interesting. I think every item should have, or maybe if you have any other ideas, I would love to hear those. Here, one idea that I had was, let's have every item have a delete button. In case we want to, say we ran out of spinach, and it's not, yeah, that's we can just click this button and completely remove it. Completely remove all of the spinach from our app. What other ways should we handle like deleting an item? Deleting a veggie or bread? Like next, when you click the item, but when you click the item just disappears. I think that will be.
Or trash.
The trash. Okay. Douglas, I think you had something.
Just the inclusion of a delete all for the sake of the user, just in case they want to reset the form.
Oh, I see.
Sort of like wipe it so they can start over from scratch.
here, like reset.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do have a reset button for the font.
Or even a text box, you can type in what you want to delete, and you press that and then delete.
Okay, that's another way, yeah. So basically like another form that you put in the ID of the item that you want to delete, and it just deletes it. Okay.
Instead of having however many delete buttons.
Yeah, okay, so this has that one like here just in case. This one can be a little bit chunky. So basically like a delete form somewhere here. Where you put in an ID and a button. Cool. Okay, so we have a rough idea of what the app should look like. What about the updating? So for the updating, I think some of the apps that I've seen is that when you click in the item that you want to change, the text will change to be input fields, and you can modify it there, and then have like a button that clicks that will a button called like save, and then it submits that. I don't think we have the budget time for that. That will be like a really nice way in which like imagine I click caret and then everything, all the information from the caret appears now in input boxes that then I can modify, and then like a save button. So that's what I named like as V2. Basically, every item have an edit button. For V1, I was thinking, and I'm open to other ideas about having an input box here on the form to create an item, where you put in an ID of the item that you want to update, and then we could have a third button if you want to, called update, or we could have the submit button. We could just have the submit button, and then if the ID box is filled, if the ID box has an ID inside, then we will know that what we want to do is actually update. We could also maybe have a checkbox called update, and then if you have the checkbox mark, then that means that the data you're sending is going to be for an updating rather than a creating the item. Any other ideas, questions, comments? Cool. Okay, so where would you start in a project like this? I think we have an overview. Yes, Jonathan.
Run it. I would actually
Okay. Okay. Any other views? Yes.
I like doing the front end first, but because I know what information I'm going to be needing to build the API and then the backend, so I know what I need this, so I need to create that now.
Okay, that's fair. Any other opinions, or should we then start with the front? It doesn't really matter. Yeah, but I would like to hear some other opinions on where to start. Yes, Owen. Mm-hmm.
I like the back end because it's like the harder part. I feel like when that's working, like front end is like okay.
I see. Cool. So.
I also like the back end first.
Okay.
Just because whatever you do in the back end, you can kind of test it on the front end.
Mm.
You can create an empty page, make sure whatever you're passing is actually being connected with.
That's a good
your
point.
HTML page.
Yeah, I think.
And then slowly you can start building it with the information that you know is already working.
I think that's a very strong point. Yeah. another point that you can think of for starting with the backend will be the fact that we know what our data is going to look like, right? And the backend is the one that is going to provide that data. And then, since the data is basically the foundation of our app, this bunch of objects, and in the front end, you can shape the data in any way you want, right? Like you can display it in any way you want. But yeah, like I think we should start in the back, thinking of the data first. Like, yes, John. Oh, that's a nice little point. Yeah, like the fact that with Node Mon, the backend will just update automatically. Cool. So yes, let's do first then sort of like thinking about the data. How are we gonna save it? Where are we gonna keep it? Okay. So on your fork and clone repos, I see 19 of you. There may be some that haven't forked it. So I'm just gonna go to that folder, and then so let's do the backend first, and then do some front end stuff. Where is it? So I think I have a folder here called full stack. Cool. So we want to build the backend first. What do we need to do if we want to build a backend? So I am here in this folder with an empty directory. I have nothing. Yes. So I created a folder called like solution. Okay, so maybe I'm gonna create okay, so then there are different ways in which we could structure our app. Douglas, you have something?
I was going to say, should we start by npm init?
So yes, we want to start with that. So since we now are going to be building sort of like two apps, one for the back end and one for the front end, it is common to have like two folders, one called server, another one called client, or one called backend, another one called front end. And then sometimes people put like the front end folder inside of the backend folder, which is fine. It doesn't really matter. But you know, having sort of some separation is good because they are technically two different apps. They could work independently of each other. So let's just do that. I'm gonna create a folder called server. Inside of my folder, and then I'm going to create another folder called client. Front end and back end are all fine names still. So I have two folders, one client and another one server. In the server, I'm going to have all the code for my back end. In the client, I'm going to have all the code for my front end, the HTML, CSS, and so on. So then I'm going to do cd into server. cd into server, and then here I want to start an npm project. Why do I want to start an npm project? Hupo? Because I need to use Express and maybe some other things too, right? And those are things that I don't want to code from scratch. But the Node Package Manager offers me. So let's do npm init, do dash y to accept all the defaults, and then we have one npm package. Yes, Hugo?
For the for the JavaScript for the HTML, you put that inside the client folder, the HTML.
The client folder, yeah. No, this one in the server. Yeah. Yes. Here in solutions / server. Cool. So everyone has like their package JSON, an empty package JSON, right? Yeah, sure.
You mean a phone call solution?
Yeah. You don't have to. You just have to have something for the back end and another for the front end. Yeah. Cool. So we have the server. As Hugo said, we want to install Express. So I'm going to do npm install Express. What else do we need? Body parser. So it turns out that, so I was reading about body parser, and it turns out that it's now built in. So at some point it was built in, then they took it out to its own module, and now they moved it back in. So in fact, we don't need it. Let's leave it out, because we're gonna use the one that is inside. Yeah. If you install it, that's fine. It's not gonna break or anything like that. Yeah.
You still have to require body parser specifically, or is it just
No, we're not gonna require body parser. We're gonna require only Express, and then from Express we're gonna use the body parser. Yeah. Yes, Joy. Joy.
When do we need to require cores or use cores?
That's a good question. So it's all about if this API is going to be accessed from a web page, from a web app, we need cores. Yeah. If we're building an API that is not going to be ever be accessed from a website, we don't need cores. Yeah, there's for instance yes, exactly, a server talking to another server. Or I was recently, for instance, using for a code challenge. Actually, this was a few months ago. For a code challenge, I had to use a stock market API, and that stock market API to get the price of stocks and to get names and symbols of stocks, I couldn't access it from a website. The challenge was about building a small trading app. Right, but that API didn't allow me to access it from a website, so I couldn't just put my website talking to that other API. What I needed to do was build a backend myself, and then we'll talk to that other one, and then a front end that will talk to mine, and then mine as another. So yeah, so you don't need cores when it's backend server talking to backend server. Or basically anything that is not a website. Yeah. We will need it for our front end here, right? So let's put the cores in the mix there, and I think that's it for now. And what else? In it?
Yeah, that's the first.
Oh, it's yeah. Yeah, so with this one we just install these two packages. Cool. I think we're ready. So now then, let's do. So now let me give you some time to work on. So build a server that has only one route inventory. That when this server should listen on port 3000. Or actually, it doesn't really matter. You can pick whatever port you want. Build listening and have only one route and respond when a network request comes to that route. Respond with the message, this is the inventory. Is that clear? Build a server with only one route / inventory. When a network request arrives to that endpoint, you reply back with this is inventory.
So with the file system that you have now, where you have a folder for server, a folder for client, do we need to just do npm init on the root folder, or we want it in the server?
Good question. No, only on the server, because we're not going to be using any packages in the front. Mm-hmm. What will you name your JavaScript file for putting this server? Server, point name. That is good too. Some people call it index because it's the main point and it's already in the server folder. I'm going to call mine app.js. Yep.
So for bypasses, so we don't need to call anything like expressive bypass automatically.
We're gonna need to set it up, yes, but with Express without importing. So cool. So you must have something similar to this. Actually, I'm missing the route. How did you do this route? Did you do app.get inventory rec next, then the function, and then you do like res.send. This is cool. So, okay, so let's try this first. You might have something slightly different. Yes. Yes, we're gonna need it eventually. Yes. I'll say let's include it once we see it break. Yeah. Yes, Owen.
We're going to use like router, express router.
Yes, we're gonna be using the express router for the sub routes. Yes.
Is it hard, so not hard, but like I had difficulty using routers with classes that were sending to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Not exactly what the problem was, but I couldn't use the router feature in multiple pages that use modules with modules on the same server. It's just like getting
I think we'll need to check. I can decipher it from what you're saying. Cool. So let's try this. How will we try this? How can we try this endpoint? See if it works. We could go to the server, or we could go to browser. That's a good point. I have to turn or run my server. I'm gonna run it here. Let's do nodemon. Oh, we didn't install nodemon. Great. Nodemon app.js. So server is running. Oh, I misspelled here a column. Let me say that. Let me fix that. Cool, so we have this. Let's try this in the browser. Error cannot get. Why is that? Right, I'm not handling the route, the root endpoint. So inventory. Cool. So this is the inventory. Great. So we have one server with one route. Now let's think about as we talked about all the different kinds of requests that we're gonna be handling here. So would I need to do like app.get if I want to handle? Actually, let's list our routes here as a comment. So we're gonna have /inventory slash vegetable. Let me maybe do this in a multi-line comment. So we're gonna have /inventory vegetable /veg-id. We're also going to have inventory /bread bread ID. This one's going to have a get, patch, delete, same for the one in here. And then this one has post and get. So if we have this in this fashion, how many endpoints do we need to handle? Or how many, yeah, like how many app dot something we're gonna need to do? We're gonna need to do 10, right? One for each method endpoint combination, right? But then this is the problem that the router comes to solve, which is you don't want to do them like all in one file. You want to separate. What makes sense to be separated. So, for instance, here what we want to do is we want to separate the veggies from the bread, so that somebody can work in the veggies part and somebody else can work on the bread part, right? That's like one consequence of having it separated. So let's then use the router. Cool. So I'm going to create a folder here called routes. And then inside of this folder, I'm going to have a file or two files. One called vegetable. Router.js, and another one for the bread. Cool. So then let's work on the, okay, so let's think about what are the routes that we want to exist on where. So we want this bread route, or this stuff to, I'm going to cut it from here, I'm going to put it in the bread router. This comment. Oops. Did I put that this was a JS file? Yeah. You can do multi-line comments in this fashion. So that's for the bread, and I'm gonna just cut this other part for the veggies. Cool. So I want this file to handle these routes and these methods. And I want this other bread router file to handle these routes and these methods. So let's do then the following. So so how can we handle multiple endpoints and multiple methods with Express without having to, I guess, let me just drive a little bit more here. So what we want to do is we want, just like in, let's look back at that lesson, nested routing. Oh no, this is maybe here. So this was sort of the example where if you have that many routes, you don't want all that to exist in your app.js or in your main file. You want to break it apart a little bit, right? We have here like multiple methods for difference and for the same route. So if we want to handle all the methods that arrive at a certain endpoint with a separate file, we could do the router for that. So in here we can say, for instance, that so this is product.js. So in here we already break down products.js. Let's see how it's used here. So for instance, this is an app.js or the main file. We could say app.use, and then for requests that arrive at this endpoint, requests of any method, have them being processed by the products router. So let's do the same for us. So what we want to do is, for all the routes, for all the requests that arrive to /inventory /inventory /veggies, we want to use our vegetable router. So here's for all the requests that arrive to this endpoint, sort of handle them with the vegetable router. Right. So do I have a vegetable router as of now? Sure. Not yet. We have to create it and export it. So let's go to this here. And here, what I want to do is, maybe here I'm going to do const router equal, first we need to import express require. Then let's create a router with express that router. Now we have a router here. And then lastly, let's just export it. Module.export. Router. So I'm not doing anything else in here. Just importing express, creating a router out of express, and then exporting that empty router for now. They are in here. So I have my server folder, has one file app.js and another folder called routes. Yeah, so I do have client and servers. Client is a sibling of the server folder. Okay, so let's see if this works. So I want to use the vegetable router, so I need to import it. I'll do const router, and where do we import it from? We import from require, or rather from routes / vegetable. So I'm just importing the vegetable router in my app. questions to this point? Cool. So then let's try it out. So right now we don't have something very interesting, but let's make this router do something. So remember that in here, what Express is going to do is every request that arrives here to this endpoint /inventory/vegetables, no matter what method, will be handled by the vegetable router. So now in the vegetable router, what we could do now is say like router.get, for instance. And here I'm just gonna have the slash, and my route handler will be rec rest next. And then here I'm gonna say let's do like res.send all. This should show. Right, so what do we want when a GET request arrives to /inventory/vegetables? Let's go back to the README. Inventory vegetable, a GET request should get all the vegetable in the inventory. Cool, so let's then, for now, let's have something. This should show all veggies in inventory. Just so that we try it out. Cool. So remember that once you have a router, you don't need to specify this endpoint. This endpoint here, just slash, is after this has already been prepended to the endpoint. So that means that this just slash here means a GET request to /inventory/vegetable. Actually, since we're not going to be using next, or at least I don't see it yet, I'm just going to remove it from here. And just leave rec and rest. Cool, so let's try this out. Let's go here. Let's say /inventory, that still gets us that. Let's do now inventory/vegetables. Nice, this should show all the veggies in inventory. Cool. Everyone get that? Thumbs up if you get that. Cool. Where is everybody else?
What did you say?
Inventory/vegetables. So that is gonna reply with this. Because this is like this. We can think of this as the root endpoint of the subroute. The subroute is /inventory/vegetables.
So like technically, if you use the router, you don't really need you don't really need like an app.get with just inventory. You just need that and then just the router.
That's correct. Yes. Mm-hmm. That's why we can consider the router as a sort of a mini app. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm going to give everyone a chance to have an app working up until this point. say that again. And this one. Wait, should I expand this? This one. So this, like the key points here are these two lines basically. Let's do like routers, main route, or main routes, yeah, main routes. So now let's think about now. So it's sort of like stopping from a second of on the routes. Let's now start to think about the data that we will want to reply with here. So if I wanted to reply with a list of vegetables, how could I implement that list? What are good things for keeping track of lists in JavaScript? More than objects. Arrays for sure are good for lists. What's another one? It has literally the name list in it. A linked list too. Right? Most commonly, like with APIs, you're gonna be having arrays for those lists. Like in the same way that when you were getting Pokemon, I think. No, what was I saying? When you were getting the movies, for instance, you were getting an array of movies. There was something else that you get an array, and then inside of the array, probably some objects, right? So, okay, so we probably want to have a vegetable array. Maybe an empty array that then we can add some items to, and also and then we can think about that. Cool, so we definitely want an array. So we could have here like a global variable, something like this, cost vegetables equal like this. Right, and then maybe let's add this vegetable that I had here. I'm gonna add it inside. So we could have something like this where, you know, we have the vegetables array, and then inside of there we have objects, right? And then when we add a new vegetable, we could just push to the array, right? When we want to update an item, we could just search through it in the array and update it. When we want to remove an item, we just search through it, search through the vegetable array, and then remove the item. But this wouldn't be very object-oriented, in the sense that one, we are mixing sort of our data. We're mixing our data with the routing stuff. Right now, this file has two things in it. It has routes, route handlers, and it also has our data. Right? So I think it's better if we separate our data from our routes too. So when you separate data from your routes or data in general, when we're building apps, they're known as models because it's the model of your data. Basically, your data looks like this. Looks like it has an ID, it has a name, it has an origin, etc. So we could say, like, you know, you could say that this sort of object is a model for what a vegetable is going to look like in our app. So what I propose is, let's have a folder here. I'm going to now, besides the routes, I'm going to create, not inside, outside of the routes, I'm going to create a folder called models or data. And then in here, I'm going to keep track of what a vegetable is going to look like, what the bread is going to look like, and how to add the logic to add an item to the list, the logic to remove an item, the logic to update an item. So let's think about that then. So here, let's create, I'm going to create a file called, let's see. I'm going to create a file called inventory, inventory.js. And then I'm going to move my vegetables over there. So I have a folder, I have a new folder for models that I call models. And it has one file called inventory.js. And then I pasted my vegetables here. So what we want to do now is sort of center on the data for a little bit. So we want the ability to add, like add a veggie, remove, update. What is the other one? Delete. We want the ability to do this. So we want to have a list of vegetables, and we want to be able to do all these things. We want to be able to add something, remove. Actually, remove and delete is the same thing. Get all, for instance. Get by ID. We want to be able to do all these operations on the list that we're going to have. Right? So since we're going to be doing a lot of these things, what we could have is, we could have functions for every single one of these. We could have a function like add veggie. That is gonna, the only thing that it's going to do is going to take a veggie and push it to the array. We could have another function, remove veggie, that is going to look for the vegetable in the array, and then just remove it from there with splice, for instance, or with any other, or yeah, splice would be the best. So we could have literally some functions here, like const add veggie, or vegetable, that could take in a vegetable. Let me close this. And what it will do is just do that push vegetable. It just pushes to the vegetables array. So then what we could have, is then if we have this function that does the work, that handles the data, what we could do is just call this function when a request arrives to the endpoint to get all the vegetables or to add a vegetable in this case, right? But wouldn't it read more nicely if we could have something like inventory dot add vegetable, where we know sort of like the inventory has a method called add vegetable or add item. You know, like if we think about how we want to reuse this, we could have some maybe a function called add item that will be able to add an item regardless of whether it's bread or vegetable, and it should add it to the right list. If we're thinking about having two lists, one for vegetables and another one for bread. So I think it will read much nicer if we have something like if we create basically a class, a JavaScript class that will hold our data. Will hold the vegetable and the bread. And it will also expose some methods to interact with that data. That is like adding elements, basically all the stuff that we have here. Adding elements, removing elements. And that could be, it would read something like this. Like, let's say, inventory that, let's call it my inventory, that add vegetable. Something like this. So if I want to have something like this where a bigger object will be managing all the inventory, then we want to have a class that we can add methods to and that can hold our data basically. So let's start to do that then. So we're going to be using a very similar version to this function. And then let's do that here. So what I want is I want to have a JavaScript representation of my inventory. What should my inventory be able to do? It should, one, hold the inventory itself, hold two lists, one for bread items and another one for vegetable items. Should let me add an item to those lists, remove an item if I no longer want it, update the item, get all the items, and get one specific item, right? So let's start to create that. So I'm going to create a class inventory. And then let's create a class inventory, and then we're going to have a constructor. Remember that the constructor is for once you instantiate an object out of this class. This is the function that will be invoked, the constructor function. So when I create an inventory, what I want to do is I want to initialize two lists, empty, one for vegetables and another one for bread. let's have that in here. So I'm gonna have this that vegetables. It's gonna be equal to an empty array. I'm gonna create another one for the bread. So, actually, what do you guys remember about classes? Cameron?
Class has like a constructor, and they have methods that they can put at the bottom and call different classes. So you export
And why? So that's correct. Yeah. So we can now create multiple inventories. That is like one of the benefits of creating classes. So classes are just a blueprint for objects. That's all it is. A blueprint for creating objects. So for instance, if I keep that variable vegetables as a global variable, then what if I want to have more than one inventory? What if I have other side of my business that needs another inventory, right? I'll need to just create then another global array for that. In this fashion, we could create another inventory object that will be able to, because it's made of the blueprint, we will have two lists, one for veggies and one for bread, and it will have all the methods as well. So, and yeah, a class is just a blueprint for an object. So if I look at this. So if I'm gonna create my inventory, and let my inventory equal new inventory. So just thinking about it, like just from here. So I have created this. My inventory is what we call an instance of the inventory class. Just sort of in the same fashion that you're an instance of the human race. Right? Yes. Let's look at it. Console log here. Let's console log my inventory. And since we're not using this file yet, I'm just gonna call it with node here. Node server models. So now, as Giselle said, because my inventory was made out of the inventory blueprint, now my inventory, the object, has two keys, vegetables and bread. And they are holding both an empty array. That is because my inventory object was made out of that blueprint. Now even now the console log shows me here also like what blueprint was used, basically what class was used to create this object. The inventory class was used. Cool. So let's have something like, so now let's have this object that represents our inventory do something more interesting, like adding items to the inventory. So far, we just created it, and it doesn't do anything. So sort of, let's play with it a little bit here. So what if we want to have, let's say I want to have a function so that my inventory has this function as well. I want to have a function called add item. And I'm going to do item type. So I have this function, add item. Now all the objects that are made with this blueprint will have this function too. So what I want to do is this item, this type here is, so the item here will be, actually we don't need this one, but cool. So let's think about this. So what are the common properties that we have between vegetables and bread? We have ID, unit, name, units, arrive at, and price. Unit is, this one is not shared. Got it. Cool, so let's then, let's do the item here. So this function, what we want this function is going to receive an item object, right? That item object will have those properties that were listed there. We'll have an ID and a name, units, arrived at, type, and a price. So what this function could do is it could check the type of the object, and if it's a vegetable, then add it to the vegetable objects. If it's a bread, add it to the bread object. So let's do something like if item type is equal to vegetable. Then let's push it to the vegetable object, the vegetable array, push item. Else, this that bread item. So since you guys are gonna be implementing some of the others. Yes, sorry. I see. That's a good point. So what Sir here is mentioning is something we call like defensive programming, where you wanna try to minimize the impact if something that you're not expecting is received. So actually, let's do that then. Else if item.type is equal to bread. Well, so another point here is another point here is also that we are the engineers of this backend of this server, right? And we decide how secure or how insecure it is. For instance, if let's say in the form to add an item we have a text box where the user is gonna type in what type of item it is, then if we don't handle it like this, then what Sergio was mentioning could happen, which is, let's say they specify type as car or something like that, and then the if is going to check only if it's vegetable. If it is, it adds it to that array. If it's not, it adds it to the bread. So you will end up adding a car item to the bread, which we don't want, right? We could also, we could do the check to different stages. We could check maybe once we receive the item from the front end, we could check right then to see if it's one of our valid objects, for instance. This is fine. Yeah. Cool. So let's try this. Yes.
The type doesn't exist yet, right? You have to make that in the level, right?
That's correct. So it doesn't exist yet. We're sort of thinking that this is what an item is going to look like, and we know that it's going to be a type. Yeah. I mean.
Is it good practice to secure your app on the front end or on the back end?
That is a good question. I think you want to secure in both. Most of the time, like you want your backend to be the most secure, like the most, the one that is going to be taken care if the world ends. Yeah.
Even if you secure the front end, you can still break it using Postman.
That's a good point. Yes, if I secure my front end saying if the type of the item is not one of these two, then don't send a request. Then an advanced user may still want to look at or may still want to make a network request with Postman or with curl that then it will break it. Yeah. Sure.
So I know the object contains type, units, ID, but you didn't make those keys yet.
Yeah, we haven't made those keys. So here, we're gonna do that next. So here, let's just see it working. Let's see. So we have an inventory blueprint, an inventory class. Every object created with this class will have veggies and bread arrays, and it will also have a function called addItem. So let's try it out here. So if I run this again, so now I'm running only this inventory.js file just for testing purposes. I'm not running my entire server yet. Here, I have my object. This is the inventory object that I created called my inventory. And I only see those two keys. I don't see the function because the function gets put in the prototype and console log doesn't show you the prototype. But the function is there. In fact, if we do my inventory.addItem, if we console log my inventory.addItem, we should see function. Because the function exists, this function addItem exists inside of my inventory. Because it was made out of that blueprint. Cool, so then let's try this. Let's try my inventory.addItem. Let's do that sample item. So I'm going to create this just to test that my function works. Sample item, I want to give it a type for sure. Let's say is bread. And I'm also going to give it a name. Let's say the name is pizza bread. Oh, let's do bagel. I don't know how to spell bagel. Like this? B-A? Thank you. That was hard. Cool. So I have a sample item here. It only has a name. It's not a full-fledged item yet. It has a type, bread, and it has a name. So I want to do my inventory.addItem, and I want to pass in my sample item. So that I add my sample item to my bread array, or yeah, in this case we did it with bread, doesn't really matter. So now here, this is much more easier to read. How my inventory that item, sample item. Or, you know, in here, we could just call this bagel or something like that. So what I think we're going to see if then we run, let me remove this. So I want to console log my inventory, the object, and then I'm going to run this file. What do you think we're going to see once I run this file? Let's do Brianna, a little bit louder.
Vegetables will be an empty array, and red will have an object with the red image.
Great, exactly. Let's look at that. Now we have, where did it go? Wait. Now we have the vegetables is an empty array. The bread is an array with one item. The bread item that we just created. So this is a much more cleaner way to store our information and also interact with it. Just adding items, literally have a function that is called add items, and so on. So what you want to do then now is implement remove item. You're gonna write that one. Now also write so basically all this add item, remove item, called update item. Update item, get all items. Do get all items. Get all items by type. Get all or get item by ID. So now, yeah, sure. Thank you. So do these function names make sense as to what they need to do? What should get all items do? Get all the items regardless of type, basically. So basically combine, get all of them. Get all the bread and all the veggies. And get all items by type should only get the ones by the specified type. So now having this, start writing your remove item. How will we implement? Oh, actually, we'll need an ID here too. Do like item ID. Right, we need to identify the item somehow for it to be removed. So let's now let's give sort of like our bagel. Let's give it an ID of 1. So let's do like item 1. I'm gonna create a couple here so that we get something. Item 2, and these items are still not the final version. So item 2 is gonna be, let's do this one a vegetable. Spinach. Let's do maybe another veggie. Carrot. Then item 2, item 3. And just add them. So I have just created 3 more objects. bagel, spinach, and carrot, and I have added them to my inventory. Now if I run this again, now I should see that I have 3. Oh, where did the bread go? Oh, there it is. We have 2 vegetables, 1 bread. So then you're gonna be working on how to remove the item. Also, another thing here, we're gonna need the type of the item. We don't really need it, but it does help. So the remove item will take in the item ID and the type. So let's say I want to remove the spinach. So if I want to remove the spinach, oh, I forgot to change the IDs. If I want to remove the spinach, what I could do is then my inventory dot remove item, and I want to say spinach is ID 2. Given what we have here, let me see if I can open this one like on the other side too. Yeah, so here on the right side is like the upper part where the class is, and on the left side we have the lower part. So work on removing, given an ID and a type, removing that element from that array. The element with ID 2 from the vegetable array. Basically work on the remove item function. Write your code here.
do with representation.
And this is the type.
This and when we look at this
VIP. This ID and type.
How much longer do we think we need? Like, let's do 3 more minutes.
Yeah, so it's well, it's not. I want to get this. It's coming right.
Right, so these are running. These are ways to run it. Running by
But yeah.
okay.
No, that's.
So the thing is, there's a course that I'm running, and you need to key into one of the specification text to be able to get
Right. This is all wrong.
That's correct. The function wasn't in there. Also, you check how you splice. You use a splice.
So in this,
But,
so once I enter, once I find it,
so they go, am I anywhere
right?
here?
So it's two, so 2 matches 2.
So,
Now,
you're basing
this tells me
on
2.
add to it, and then if I need words and matches, is this, then splice it. I'm not sure if this is good.
Yeah, the only part is that here the splice.
Yeah.
The first argument to splice. Look at the concatenation.
Yeah. That might be. Yeah.
Look at what the first argument to the documentation is, and think about what the first argument you're passing is.
Right.
Yeah, because
That's the only problem you see. You have.
Can you go up before you go? Can you go up?
On what side? These are the. This is the upper side or the left side.
Oh, really? Oh.
wow.
That's correct. Yeah. You want to use those currencies. It doesn't work. Don't. Just try it. Yeah, I realized that later on.
Do you mind sharing this code? My code will keep writing different. I have that part. I just need the other one.
Which one?
For this one, I put if the type is defined, like this bracket type, and then inside we access this type, and then we do dot filter the element that equals the item ID.
Yeah, that's fine too.
Alright.
You're just filtering out all the elements that are not matching.
What should I do if the type is invalid? Should I just return like undefined or no or something?
Yeah, that's fine. Or you could also throw an error saying invalid type.
Okay. But yeah, and I was thinking for the item.js, you want us to put this in the item?
Yeah, you
Because I know
will
the item
have.
has a bunch of properties.
Yeah, you have another class for the item.
And then we're gonna create the items there and then add it to the inventory.
Yeah, in fact, we're just gonna start with an ATO one, and we're gonna be sending this information from the front end in a form, and then when the post request arrives to our server, calls this function at item.
Okay. Are we gonna save all the items in our item file, or are we gonna save them in our inventory file?
It will be saved in the in this one in the inventory.
Okay.
The item file will just be the blueprint for the object.
For the actual item itself.
Uh-huh.
So it's just gonna say like class item and then all the properties.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
All the properties for the item are inputs, right?
Yes. They're
So we'll put it in the
they're just
constructor.
properties. Yeah. They don't have any methods.
Yeah. Okay. And then what is this? These are the same thing?
This is, yeah, it's the same thing.
Okay, and then this is. Oh, there's nothing here.
Yeah, nothing there.
Oh, this is what I. Okay. So you have a folder for the server, a folder for the models.
Yeah, we have.
You call them models, right?
We have server, and then server has models, routes, and non-modules.
The no modules from NPM though, right?
And the models will have the classes.
Did you do NPM init on the
on the server?
On the server folder?
Yeah. Only on the
I
server.
did on the other one. Okay, makes sense. Yeah. If you do it on the parent folder, it's not in order to do it on the server.
No, you should do it in the server because the front end doesn't need anything from NPM. At least not yet.
Okay. Okay, so far we just have this file, the app, and the models.
Yeah.
Okay.
This one has here.
Go.
just the one that matters. And then just generate that out.
At that index. If the IP matches, then
Yeah.
the index of the
So
element.
like,
So the IP
This
is
is
two, I'm filtering everything.
mm-hmm.
Filtering the whole array until I find where
It'll take it
which
out.
vegetable has the IP two. When I find that,
Wait, is that good or
I get that index.
I don't know.
Oh yeah, I wanted to take out ID 3.
Okay, I took it out. Cool.
You have to get.
But if I try to take out ID 4, it still takes out 3.
Oh, so that means that your remove item function is not working correctly. Then.
Looping over.
I see. Yeah. So the thing is your splice. So what are the two arguments that you need to pass into splice? You look at the docs. I think it's here. So like, take a look at the documentation. What are the two arguments? Then verify your arguments.
So this is
You,
index. How much you want to take out?
yeah. And you can see if you scroll down a little bit more. Here, look at it here.
Okay.
So what are you passing currently?
That's the start.
That's the star, but then your star is an object.
I thought the start was like the current. I thought it'd be the current.
That's the thing, the object is the actual full item. What you want to know is the index at which that item is to start removing from there and then remove one. That's why it works with 3. In fact, it will actually work with any number. It will work exactly with any number, but that's because your first argument to the splice is not correct. You want to pass a number over there, but you're passing an entire object. Uh-huh.
So you're going fine. Index. Find out.
Are we removing an entire item, or just something?
Everything, the entire item. Cool. So, what are some of the ways people implemented the remove item function? Cameron?
Yeah, so all I basically did was look for the ID that I want to target, and then it's made that, like, for example, vegetable, the location of the index of the vegetable array, I made that index equal to nothing. And then I erased the entire index here.
I see. So you're depending on the type, you're searching one of the two arrays, right? Based on the type, you search one of the two arrays.
Yeah, I'm searching. Well, I don't specify which array, but I'm searching, for example, searching vegetable array.
I see.
And if it has
I see.
an ID in there, I delete that based on what I'm looking for.
Okay.
So I can add also like a type argument inside there, and specify whether it's vegetable or red, and then search that array.
I see. So you're searching both arrays just in case we don't know where the item might be, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's valid. Douglas, which one do you do?
Sort of the similar. So what I did is, just to be very explicit, is I created two new variables, just basically restating item ID and type. So I made what am I deleting equals type, and item to be deleted is item ID.
I see.
Then I did if statement. So if what am I deleting is vegetable, then I did a loop over that array. So I said I especially did a for I loop, so I could get the indexes of, in this case, vegetables for the first one. At which point, and then if vegetables at index I dot ID is equal to item to be cleared, then this dot vegetables dot splice acts with I comma 1.
Got it. Okay, so you basically check what is the type, and you loop over the array of that type of items, and then searching for an ID match. And then once there is an ID match, then you remove the item with splice.
And then
cool.
same for vegetable if it doesn't get vegetable.
Right, so if the type is not vegetable, you just do the same thing. Cool, so let's do that one. So let's do, we could do also, yeah, I heard that some people use filter. Filter is a really nice way too, very clever, where you basically filter out the array of the item that matches the item that you have. Which imagine, you have like, what is it called? Sifter, where you sift whatever you want to sift. And that was just checking for the ID that you're interested in. So that one, the ID that you want to remove, will sort of get caught on the sifter, and it's not going to be in the output or in the final array of the filter. That's another way. So let's do that here. So let's check if type is equals to vegetables, then let's search the vegetables array. Let's do for let I equal to 0, while I is less than this staff vegetables dot length I plus plus. So what this loop is going to do is just looping over the array. Then we check if. Actually, I'm gonna create a variable here called current item. Current item is going to be equal to this dot vegetables at index I. Then we check if current item dot ID triple equal the item ID. Then we can do this dot vegetables dot splice. We want to splice. Two arguments for splice is the start. Where do you want to start removing or adding elements? I want to start removing from I, and I want to remove 1. And so that would be it for that one. Else, so else if type to bread, we just do the same thing. But also note here there is some repetition here, because I'm just basically repeating this same stuff, but now in the breads. Bread array. There is some repetition. If you can think of a way to get rid of the repetition, go ahead and get rid of it. For now, we could just leave it like this. So basically, if it's a vegetable, we loop over the vegetables array, checking for a match in the ID. Once we see that match, we use splice to remove that item. Something that I should have clarified is this function should return the removed item. Return the removed item. How could we get the removed item? I guess here, is that splice returns maybe the removed item? Array.splice, JavaScript. No, this. Splice return value an array containing the deleted elements. If only one element is removed, an array of one element is returned. If no elements are removed, an empty array is returned. Okay, so we could just have this here, like sort of. We could use the return value of the slice, or we could also return here. Oh no, that one's. Let's do let deleted item equal. No, just current item, right? So we could just do return current item, since the current item, return current item. Current item is a variable that I created right here for storing every instance of the items there. Yeah.
Could we just skip the current item value of a variable and just use this vegetable instead, since it's more explicit?
You mean instead of current item here, use this vegetables?
No, I'm just taking. I'm talking about not using current item in general.
Okay. The reason why we did current item here is because then if I don't use current item here, I need to save this vegetables at index I dot ID triple equal item. It's not a lot, but maybe let's do like current. Yeah, no, current item is fine. And also, if we don't use current item, when we remove the element, then we lose it. So current item is good for two reasons. One is it shortens our code a little bit in the sense that I don't need to say this vegetables at index I dot item but dot ID, and it also keeps track of the current item in case we remove that item to return it. Mm-hmm. So let's try this out. I'm gonna try it here on the. I'm gonna leave the implementation here, and this is the same file. No, this is the same file. And for trying it out, I'm just gonna remove item 2. So I'm gonna do. Oh yeah, here we have it here. It's something like let removed item equal that, and let's console log removed item. Removed item. So I'm going to console log the removed item, and I'm also going to console log my inventory just to verify that it was removed. Cool. So let's try that here. So let's do node inventory.js, actually model/inventory.js. So we removed this one spinach, and now we see the vegetables doesn't have spinach anymore. So that's good. Our remove item works. Yes, Hugo. Yeah, you can put the console log here. but once we integrate this, once our server starts to use these functions, what I want to actually do is send back the removed item, in case, so that was the removed item. So now we're building here this inventory object that has now two methods. We can add items and we remove items, right? Let's get working on the get item by ID. So write a function that will take in an ID. So basically implement the get item by ID. This one will just get one item by the ID. One item. So I guess let's take a type here then too. So that let's get an item by ID of this type, basically. So let's do like 5 minutes on that one, and also pair up with someone to compare and approach this. Yep.
Do we have to return something for the remove thing?
Yes, return the removed element or the removed item.
question. If I were to, instead of writing out the whole, if I do like let I in this type vegetables, how would I access the items again? Would it be like I dot
Wait, say that again.
no, instead of putting let's try
Oh, I see.
how would I
Then you do I contains the index. So if you want to access the element at index I, you'll just do the same thing. This vegetables at index I.
I'll just say this vegetables.
Just like exactly the same as this one.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So did anybody notice anything about the get item function? Like remove? Right, because if we think about remove, require us to find the element first. And then after that, use the location or the index at which that element was found and remove it. So in this one, actually, I'm going to get rid of the repetition that we saw here. But let's look at it now from this perspective. So we know that it will be basically the same just without the removal. So we can have something like, let me just literally copy and paste this and then get rid of the duplicate. So I'm going to remove, just remove the splice line, right? Just literally remove the splice line. Now let's go here. So let's say we want to get an element by ID and we want to get the last one. So first, I'm not going to remove any more. And let's do my inventory that get element by ID, get item by ID 3. Type vegetable. Let's found item equal that. Then console log the found item if you find anything. Cool. So let's go to our console or terminal and do node that. Nice. We found the right item. We find the item with ID 3. What if I put an ID that doesn't exist? Do you guys try that? 6. return undefined. Undefined is fine. I think if we try to get an element by ID 6 who doesn't exist, we get undefined. The only problem that I have with undefined is that we don't return explicitly undefined. It's basically when the item ID is not an item ID that exists, this function will implicitly return undefined because it doesn't go here, or actually it does. Let's say it's vegetable, so it goes here. This never returns because it never found the element. Then it quits. We run onto the last line and return undefined implicitly. So let's say instead of, let's say this, let's return null. If you didn't find it, return null. To be a little bit more explicit. Didn't find it. So let's try again. Cool. If it doesn't find it, it's going to return null. Yes, Malik? Can I use this type in the parameter so that I don't have to write the for loop twice? Yep, that's a good way. The only problem with that will be the S here, but we could work around that. Cool. Questions regarding this one so far? So we can get rid of this repetition here. So one way in which we could get rid of the repetition is let's declare a variable here like array that is going to be undefined at the beginning. And then if it's vegetable, then we set array equal to this dot vegetables. If it's bread, I'm going to cut this for loop from here. If it's bread, then we just do this dot bread. Right? Then we just loop over our array. So I'm going to paste this, and wherever it was saying bread here, actually I'm just going to say array. So here I define a variable that's empty, an array. Then if the type is vegetable, then we set the array to be equal to the vegetables array. If the type is bread, then we set the array to be the bread array. Cool. And then the for loop is just searching over the array. So in this way, we can have only one for loop. Cool. Is this making sense so far? Cool. So get item by ID. So I think this one should be one of the first ones that we should connect. Well, actually, let's do this one. Get all items. What should the get all items function do? Let's do get all items by type. Uh-huh.
the class itself, and then return the array that given.
So you should just key into that. Based on the type, key into the appropriate array and return that. So let's do if type super equal vegetable, then return return this dot vegetables. Else, instead of being defensive here, else if type equal bread, then just return this dot bread. This is the get item by ID, and this is the same file, but this here on the right I'm showing the get item by type. Get items by type. Questions, comments?
So you can return, well, you want to return this. And then this will be an
never return. No, wait, this is the get by ID.
This is
Wait, the return here is like return null here. It didn't find it. Let's try it again. Let's see if it returns null. Oh, let's see.
yeah, but I don't have a string. Oh. No, and I had the best numbers and I put them in a string. Like,
Okay. Still undefined, should return null.
Exactly. This is the spawn statement. I hate this computer. Mine was doing that too. I don't want to know the problem. This is every time. Every time.
Oh yeah, you have two functions. You have two functions with the same name.
What was the problem?
This one is overriding that one.
This is where I'm gonna cry. And if I'm being worse.
This is a kind of a quick question. Is there any way to like make the this dot, right? Make it more like
Dynamic?
like if I put it into argument, then it's like
Yeah, like one way would be if our arrays inside of the inventories have the same name as the type, exactly the same name, then we could use computed properties with square brackets to say like this square bracket type, and then
this without a dot
with square bracket and then type. But that is then if our arrays are this array bread is the exact same name as the type, but vegetables is plural where the type is singular. Yeah, cool. So let's start to incorporate some of this in our actually backend. So for now, let's just do. So let's do this. So we find that does this work? They get all items by type. Let's see if that works. So here I'm gonna do console log my inventory dot get all items by type, and then just get all the vegetables, and then just doing that inside of the console log to see if it works. So I'm gonna console log all the elements or all the items that are of this type. But actually, this should be just vegetable. Get all items by type vegetable. So let's run this in here. Nice, we got 2 vegetables. Let's check it out with the opposite. Bread. Nice, we got the bagel. Let's search with 6.2. We get undefined. In here, it's up to us to decide what happens if none of those match. I'm gonna take for this this is a decision that we the developers make. I'm gonna make the decision of when we don't find something, I'm gonna return null. Null is gonna be my indicator that I didn't find anything explicitly. So I'm gonna do return null. Cool. So if it doesn't find it, return null. Cool. So let's start with this one. So now we have these functions that then they can map directly to endpoints in our server. Basically, when a GET request arrives to /vegetable, let's just call this function get all items by type and pass in the vegetable. So now let's integrate this with our server. Even though we haven't finished with this, with these other two functions, I think we could do get all items by type just to demonstrate it. And here I'm gonna start. Originally the inventory will start empty with no items. Here I'm gonna start my inventory with these 3 items, just so that we have something to see. I added them, and what I'm gonna do here now is I want to export my inventory and then import it in my routes to be able to use the data. So I'm gonna say module.export equal my inventory. So in this way, I'm exporting my inventory that has 3 items in it, 2 veggies and 1 bread, and then I could use it anywhere else. So here, just exporting my inventory. So I'm gonna go to app.js, or not actually app. I'm gonna go to bread, for instance. Oh no, which one was? We were working on one. I think it was vegetables. Yeah, the vegetable router. I'm gonna go to the vegetable router, and here we have. Wait, is it plural? The one that we said? Vegetables, yeah, okay. So here, once we get a GET request to just meaning inventory / vegetables, I'm gonna import my inventory here. Let's do something like here. Const my inventory equal to require, and then the path to my file, which is in a folder. First, the current folder, parent folder. In my parent folder, I have these 3 folders, and app.js is in models, and in there is in the inventory file. So here I'm importing my inventory from this file that is in the parent folder of the current file /models/inventory.
You would extra dots so to make it deeper folders?
Say that again?
You put 2 dots instead of 1. Does that mean you could do 2 folders?
No, I did these 2 dots because I want to go to the parent. If I only do, so we currently have something like this. 3? Yeah, so basically we have, this folder, this vegetable router file is in the routes folder, right? And I want to grab something from the models folder. So to grab something that is in the models folder, it's like, we have something like, so we have our folder server, right? We have a folder server, and then this folder has 2 folders. One routes, and another one models. And inside of routes we have a file called veggie router. I just abbreviated to veg router. And in the models we have our inventory. So if I want to use inventory.js from my veggie router folder, what I need to do is I need to go up to the parent, because so 1 dot is for the current folder, or the current folder. So from the vegetable router perspective, 1 dot will be the routes folder. And in the routes folder, we don't have an inventory file, right? So you need to go up one more level. With second dot, it takes us to the parent folder. Then you're in the server. Then once we're in the server, we just drill down back, saying this is the two dots. So this is like from this file's perspective, this is the single dot, the routes. This is the double dots. And then we just say double dots, which is the server / models / inventory.js.
Does that keep going, or is it not likely for it to repeat?
On bigger projects, it could be about 3-4 levels.
Okay.
Yes.
So if we did like a /server we did all the routes and the same thing.
If you mean if I did something here like server, something like this. This wouldn't work because this is going to be looking for. Actually, I wonder if. Let's see what happens. Let's see. This wouldn't work, I think. Node app.js. Yeah, it breaks because it says it cannot find module server / model / inventory. That is because in here we don't have a folder called server, or you always have to think about this is from the perspective of the file, of the vegetable router file. From this perspective, we don't have a server folder. This, you can think of the file can only look like sort of downward. But if you want to look upward, then you need to use the dot and dot and dot. Cool. So I imported my inventory here, and then here, let's just do rest.json. Or actually, let's do like let all veggies equal to my inventory dot get all items by type vegetable, and then just do rest.json all veggies. So if I'm sending JSON data, which in this case it is, the all veggies is going to be an array with all the vegetables. Then I will do rest.json. You can still do rest.send, but I prefer to be a little bit more explicit, saying I'm sending JSON data back. So then let's try it out. Let's try go to the browser, go to our local host. You can see here that I have my URL is at /inventory/vegetables. I'm gonna hit enter. I think, do I have my server running? My server is not running. Nodemon app. Server is running. Refresh, and we got our data. Nice. We got all the vegetables. Questions, comments, help. Who needs help? I can go. Oh yes, that's correct. Yeah, the user input will come in the request object.
Yeah.
Yep.
build, you have to import server.
Cool. So that's how we can then map the get all veggies. Which ones? So we got this one settled. This one done. That's maybe in 15 minutes that we have. Think about, actually implement this one. Implement to get a get request to inventory, to slash inventory slash vegetable slash ID to give you back the vegetable with that ID. So basically we already have the function, which is get item by ID. So you just need to assemble the route. So you will need to add one more route for a get request that takes in or that uses a URL parameter that is going to be the item ID or the veggie ID. Yes. You're gonna. So what are the two lines that I need to type in here? Due to the fact that, we already did the heavy lifting on the class side. So I literally need to say two lines or maybe even one. So what I want to do is I want to make a request to, let's say, vegetable/3. Oops. Vegetable/3. Basically in here, if I make this request, I should get only the item with ID 3, that is a vegetable. I shouldn't get an array, I should get just the item with that ID. So I need to have at least two lines here. What would those be? Douglas?
First define a variable.
Let's define a variable.
Let user input rec.params. Might be wrong.
Okay, yep. Let's maybe call it item ID.
Oh, okay.
Item ID, and then that's gonna come from the request that params.id. And we're gonna need a. Oh. Yeah. So that we have the ID here. Actually, let me just call this ID. ID equal to rec.params.id. This here is sort of a catcher here that will catch anything after the slash. And will capture it into something called an ID. And that ID, that capture will be available on the rec.params.id. Cool. So then we have the ID there. Then we just do let veggie equal. What is the function that we worked on earlier in the inventory?
Get item by ID.
My inventory.get item by ID. And then we just pass in the ID. And we also need the type. Let's do the type vegetable. And then let's just do res.send or res.json veggie. So in this way, then the get item by ID is taking care of the looping, the searching. It returns the element that it found, and then we put it in this variable called veggie. and we just say res.json veggie. Let's see what this is going to give us now. I call it just ID. You could call it item ID or anything you want. So I have that. Oh, I got null. Do we have a vegetable with ID 3? Let's look at it here. Yeah, we have. Oh, this is interesting. So I put in 3 here at the end, and I get null. Bingo. So say that louder.
The 3 is not a string.
What 3?
ID.
The ID here on my inventory. These IDs are numbers. And the ID that we have in the URL is a string. So the string 2 is never going to be equal to the number 2. So let's parse that. Parse int maybe. Like that. Parsing the ID, then we pass in the ID. Let's try now. Nice. Now we got our item. Now let's say maybe item 2. Nice, we got spinach now. 1, we don't have a vegetable with ID 1. Right? Then we get null. The parse int. Because the IDs are numbers. Say that again? The body? Rec.body, yeah. But you will need to make sure that you have set up your body parser to accept URL encoded and JSON. So, then we kind of run out of time now. Cool. So, so now, just in these 6 minutes that we have, implement the same. So basically, vegetable router is 1. Implement the bread router. The bread router with these 2 functions as well, with these 2 endpoints. So we wrote the vegetable router. Now you write the bread router. Well, copy and paste and run and see if it works. So that is, this is also the power of functions and reusability. I guess, so tomorrow we can keep working on this, at least for the morning, at least until we get a decent front end that is able to send the information. And then we can move on to Postgres and PG Promise.
not see where I have my mistake. So here I have for the ID, parsing that on prime.
Makes sense.
That's coming out. I'm gonna should print this. And in the inventory, I have carrot as with ID 1, Spanish ID 2, and broccoli ID 3.
Oh, but you have two ID 1s and two ID 2s.
Even though they're different, one's a red and one's a...
Oh, okay, yeah, okay, that makes sense. That shouldn't matter. I think something that we want to implement tomorrow is like an ID generator. It'll generate the IDs for us.
So now I have the inventory / vegetable, and then 1, which is carrot, I get the carrot.
Okay.
2 should be spinach, but I get carrot again. With the ID that changed. And 3 should be broccoli, but carrot with an ID.
Oh.
I don't know where.
Let's see this.
Like, so I started looking at this.
Maybe you're going to.
So it's here. So it runs this if statement. This is basically where it ends. So the array now is to this vegetables.
Uh-huh.
And then in here, for the length,
Yeah.
I have the current item set for that array of and then whenever
The ID matches the ID.
then it should return.
The current name, yeah. So show me your inventory here a little bit more. So you have.
These are the 3 vegetables right here.
Huh. The interesting part is that it returns the right ID.
Right, but not the name is not.
Show me a little bit more now. 2, 3, 4, then 5. And you get the other way. Not sure. Let's look at here. Vegetable router. Get ID.
Like I don't know where.
This all looks fine. So I think we should try it. Let's try the function get element by ID isolated. And yeah, kill the server.
Okay, so here, and now let me go to.
This
This should be lit.